Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to another episode of the Serene View. I'm Serene, your host, and today I have with me Melanie Kendell. Melanie is one of the most fascinating ladies I know. She is the lady who thinks outside the box, outside the box. If you're wondering, like, now that I'm outside the box with COVID, what's outside this box? Well, Melanie is the lady you need to speak to. She's an organizational ecologist. Now, if you have never heard of that, well, now's the time to find out. So, yes, Melanie, let us know, what is an organizational ecologist?
Well, if you think of an ecologist, what they do is they look at the whole ecosystem and how things work and interact with each other. Well, I do that for organisations. Looking at whether or not you're doing things as efficiently and effectively as you can do.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. Thank you. And today with Melanie, we are going to talk about a really interesting topic, like really interesting, because this is the topic that has been asked of me like repeatedly over the last 2 years. Okay, it's called creating ownership. I think many, owners, leaders use different words. How can I get them to take initiative and create ownership? But the crux of the matter is this: how can I get people to work hard when I'm not there to look at them? I mean, they are all working from home. So what do I do to get them to work hard? And today, Melanie is going to share it with us. So, Melanie, come, tell us a little more about it. I mean, uh, why is this such an important topic right now?
So if you have ownership, you don't need to watch people because they will just get on with things for themselves. So if you think about if you rent a property versus you own a property, who's going to do the maintenance better? Who's going to go, oh, I can improve this property by building a deck or something like that? It's if you have ownership. So creating ownership for your people creates all sorts of good behaviors and means that you don't have to work as hard.
Well, that sounds like a really good idea. I think so many leaders have told me that they're burning out, they're overwhelmed, they're exhausted. So I think the whole idea of I don't have to work as hard really sounds great to me. Yes, it sounds fantastic.
Yes.
And so tell us a little bit more, right? Like, what would be, let's start with definition. Right? What is your definition of ownership? I mean, what does ownership mean?
So as we'll see in the model, which I've got some slides to show
Do you
you.
want me to share the
Um,
slides?
yeah, I can
Okay.
do that. Let's see how we go.
Yes.
This is a new platform to me, so we shall. Oh, are you going to do the slides? Yep.
Yes. I mean, do you want to share it?
Yep.
I'm happy to let you
Yep.
share it if
No, that's
you
fine.
prefer. Yes.
Click forward. There's a whole bunch of animations, so
So, okay. So, you want me to click forward?
we're gonna do a lot of clicking.
This one? Do you want me to click forward again?
Yes. So the model is basically consists of three things, but the main two are accountability and authority. So I don't know how many of you are racy enthusiasts. And I have found when I've presented this before that some people get hung up on the definitions used in racy because they use similar words. Certainly accountability and responsibility they use. I'm using the words as they are used in English rather than how they are used in racy. And it will be interesting to see how this translates into different languages. Certainly, there will be nuances of language that will be interesting to explore. But yeah, so to start off with, we have accountability and authority. Click forward, please. And these two need to be in balance, and they are managed by the organization. So this is what you are in control of if you are a leader. is getting the balance between accountability and authority. Click forward, please. So the third part is responsibility, and that's only for the individual to bring, and the individual only brings it at their discretion. So you can't actually force people to bring their responsibility, but you need that third piece to, click forward please, create ownership. Ownership is where you have accountability, authority, and responsibility in balance. Okay, so let's explore those a little bit further. Click forward, please. Let's look at accountability first. So what is accountability? Click forward, please. And most people understand accountability, click again, as basically what you are expected to do. So it is about delivering your work. You're accountable for delivering your work, completing tasks, raising issues, enlisting help at a task level, and meeting deadlines. And most people are familiar with that kind of definition of what you're accountable for. But there's also other things that you're actually accountable for. Click forward, please. So you're also accountable for your behaviors. So conforming to the norms, adjusting to context, living the values, all that kind of stuff. It's basically anything that is an expectation on you. And this is what people think you're in control of. So that's why I've said it's perceived control. If we go over to the other side, click forward, please, and we look at authority. This is your actual ability to affect control. So these are the things that you're allowed to do. So things like you should be able to, when we're looking at that delivery space, you should be able to negotiate or refuse work. You should be able to have access to resource that you can actually authorize the spending of. You need to be able to enlist help at an outcome level rather than at a task level. And you need to be able to set or at least influence the pace in which you deliver. So we need to have those two things in balance, otherwise you get into overwhelm. And in behavior, you have authority to share information and to challenge those norms. So if the norms are not working for you, you should be able to raise that. So looking at responsibility, as I said, that's brought by the individual at their discretion. Click forward, please. Can't remember where I was going with this. Is this the people on the bus? No. So this is self-control. That's right. Yeah. So self-control starts off with the generic desirable traits. So yes, I'm honest and I have integrity and respect and all that sort of stuff. But then we get into some of the other things where you have a split between whether you're in a stable environment or whether you're in a very volatile environment. So in a stable environment, things that people value with self-control is conscientiousness, being a team player, being reliable, all that kind of stuff. Whereas in a volatile environment, you need to show initiative, be collaborative, be invested, all that kind of stuff. So there's actually quite a different set of values for what self-control means and what responsibility you're looking for in people. Okay, next slide, please. So that's the basic model for creating ownership. And hopefully that was clear. Are there any questions at this stage?
I think that it's a fascinating model. I mean, talking about authority, accountability, responsibility, but I actually think, I mean, to me is I wonder whether the it really depends on the person, especially when it talks about responsibility. I mean, are we just
Yeah,
hiring the wrong people? That's why they can't take responsibility. Are we, why is it that I have spent so much time and effort hiring the best people that I think really fits in my team, and then I can't get them to take that responsibility?
yeah, yeah. So a couple of things. If you don't put your accountability and authority in balance, people will disengage. So even if you've got the right people, they're looking at it and going, "Well, you give me all the accountability and no authority. Why should I bother?" So strange enough, that's kind of where we're going in the next set of slides. So we may as well get straight into that if you've got no other questions.
Sure. Let's get to it. Come, let me forward to the next slide. What happens when things are out of balance? That
Yeah. So when you have lots of accountability and no authority, you have what I call missed opportunities. So what that looks like, if we click forward, is um, we will get people being held to account without having the authority. Now, this to me is the most common scenario. People with high responsibility will try to affect change. Unfortunately, what they'll find is that, as I said, they have all the accountability, no authority. They'll get frustrated. Good ideas go nowhere through lack of support or resource. So you're missing out on those good ideas. They feel unappreciated. They actually point out issues because they care and want things to improve, and that's often misinterpreted as being negative or disruptive or cynical or whatever. So that you often find that the people that are branded as troublemakers, this is exactly the scenario that they're in. They have very high responsibility, but they're not able to actually deliver because all they have is accountability and no authority. Click forward. Oh yes, talent. The outcome is that talented people burn out and leave, or if they stay, they become cynical or actively sabotage. And then click forward again. Just if you have the wrong people and they have people with low responsibility, what you'll get with accountability and no authority is presenteeism and passivity. So they'll basically sit back and take the paycheck. Okay, moving on. Another scenario is that people have lots of authority but no accountability. And this is what I call misalignment. So if we look at it, having authority without being held to account, if you have people with high responsibility, they can go off and do basically their own thing. They will have high self-interest and they may pursue pet projects over organizational goals. If it's a little bit distorted, you'll find that some people will take that responsibility and that authority and wield power for their own personal gain, or to dominate people, or to basically just make everybody else's lives miseries. One of the things that people talk about a lot is having autonomy. This is actually a scenario where you have autonomy, but it still can be misaligned, and it still can be an out of balance situation. It can spiral out of control to become highly toxic, and people burn out and leave. And then the next scenario, and people with low responsibility, but they have lots of authority, they basically piss off and spend lots of time on sick leave or something like that, or they just become aimless, and you don't get much out of them. So finally, if you have the organisation has done their bit and they've created balance between accountability and authority, but you've got people with very low responsibility, you get misbehaviour. And that's where people will game the system. They spend more effort on finding ways to avoid work than on doing work. They will manipulate priorities towards performance metrics that gain the most personal reward. So if you've got a bonus scheme of some sort, that's all they're going to concentrate on. What are the levers that they need to press to get the most gain? Other people will feel unfairly burdened or unrewarded, and they will piss off. And unchecked, that scenario means that you're only left with the deadwoods, which is people with low responsibility. Okay. So, any questions up to there?
Well, I haven't received any questions. I did receive a comment from Jacob, but that was a little bit earlier, where he said to compare and contrast organizational ecology with behavioral economics and continuity management systems. So I think I'm not sure whether we are at this stage or whether we want to leave this at the end, but I think
leave that one to the end, I think.
what I wanted to really comment on is this whole, different things that we are looking at, right? Like, what is the issue with the organization? And really looking at it as a leader and going, hey, what behaviors am I seeing, right? Am I seeing people frustrated, with ideas going nowhere, feeling unappreciated, talented people burning out, talented people leaving? Am I seeing people abusing their authority, pursuing their pet projects, or worse, right? Am I seeing a lot of politicking and actually people really kind of, out to game the system, right? When you look at the situation, I think it's easy to say, oh, people are not taking ownership. Oh, why? But it's more useful as a leader to kind of look at it and go like, hey, what am I really seeing? And my question,
it's a model to be able to say, okay, is that the person or is it the system? So I'm a big believer in Deming's work, that 99 times out of 100, the system sets people up to do bad things. So it's not the person being bad, it's the system. So if you see that kind of behavior, this gives you a model to go, oh, I'm seeing that behavior. What's out of alignment?
My question, actually, I haven't received questions. So if you guys have any questions or if you have any objections, they just throw into the comment. I will highlight it. But I wanted to ask this very simple thing, which is all the three models almost, duplicate the same end effect, which is talented people leave, right?
Yep.
So either they burn out and they leave, or it's such a toxic environment that they prefer to work somewhere else, or at the end of the day, it could be, just dead wood left.
Let's say and they're disengaged. Yeah.
And my question is, a lot of times, if I'm a leader and I'm actually looking at larger situation and I'm not kind of intimately involved with people, perhaps even I interview them and have lunch with them and they are not opening up to tell me the truth. I do the exit interviews, I'm not getting the truth. How do I know? How do I tell? Right? What I'm seeing is this huge turnover. I'm seeing people disengage. I'm seeing all manners of presenteeism and absenteeism. How do I know where the problem has gone, right? Has gone wrong?
Yeah. So if they talk about they're frustrated, that they have too much work on, the overload, all that sort of stuff, the model predicts that what they have is too much accountability, not enough authority. Whereas if you're seeing people saying, "Oh, my boss is power crazy, and he goes off and does his pet projects, and I'm supposed to go off and do that, and it's not aligned with where I think I should be working," and all that sort of stuff. You look at that person's boss and you say, do they have all the authority but no accountability? Do I need to go and look at their accountabilities? So it gives you depending on what they're complaining about, it gives you a point to look at to go, oh, that's what I'm seeing. What's out of alignment? Mind you, I do think exit interviews are almost too late.
Yeah, but I think a lot of the times that's where people are, that's why I see it as a problem, right? I see people leaving, or I see high absenteeism, I see high presenteeism. And then when the stats come in, that's where I realize, oh, there is a problem. And then
Yeah.
I know sometimes it's a little bit too late, but I think for a lot of leaders, we are so bogged down with the operational stuff, with getting things done, right? And especially in COVID, right, where I only see my reports on Zoom for that 1 hour of meeting about work, right? And there's very little of, I can't even observe their body language as they work anymore, right?
Yeah.
So there is all of that, and I think that's why a lot of times it only ended up being, when there is a problem. And I think
Yeah.
being able to speak about it, talk about it, and using the model to kind of go, are we enabling? I mean, is the organizational system enabling people to just misbehave? And I agree with you. I think we often fall prey to the fundamental attribution error, right? I mean, we think it's the actor when it is the environment.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't agree with us, I mean, feel free to throw it into the comment. But I want you to think about: do you behave the same way at home,
Yeah.
with your boss, with your mother, with your kids? And how much of a difference that makes in
Yes.
terms of your work, right?
Yeah.
So,
I
I
mean,
mean, no, in terms of your behavior, I apologize. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, the whole thing of ownership is it's basically treating people as adults, which a lot of organisations infantilize their people. So yeah,
Yeah.
if you give
I'm
them
laughing because yes, I agree with you. Yeah. So anyway, let's talk about this, right? Let's like, okay, fine. You've sold me. I wanna build ownership. What do
mm-hmm.
I do? Let's talk about it. Come.
Yep, cool. So paths for building ownership. As I said, the commonest scenario is where you've given people lots of accountability, but you haven't actually balanced that with giving them the authority. So how do we address that? Well, there's two paths we can take. We can go down the pathway of giving them less accountability. Reducing the overload of accountability, make expectations on your people explicit. Okay, a lot of times we give people accountabilities at task level. We don't give them the why, the clarity around what it is we're trying to achieve, all that sort of stuff. So they're just basically going through and going task, 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 task. And they can't then engage in what I call constructive conflict. So that constructive conflict is basically saying, well, you want me to do that, but actually, maybe there's a better way. So you're losing out on all of that innovative thinking. So creating visibility work on capacity as well. So rather than giving people 30 things to do, give them 30 things to do, but say you only need to do these 1 or 2 or 3 things now. So creating a system that gives them really clear understanding of what is priority, so that they only have to deal with 1 or 2 things at a time. You need to make it safe to raise issues. enlist help, and question deadlines. So give people the opportunity to say, oh, but I don't have the capacity to do that, or I don't have the resource to do that. Prioritize team performance over individual performance. So be really clear about what the team is supposed to achieve rather than the tasks that an individual is supposed to achieve. Strangely enough, don't reward excessive hours. And I don't mean don't pay them overtime. I mean, don't celebrate, oh, we're so busy. Oh, I worked 70 hours last week, all that sort of stuff. That's not sustainable. And people actually become less productive if they're under that kind of pressure. So shift to celebrating outcomes rather than effort. So that's kind of that side of the equation. Going over to the other side of the equation and increasing the authority side. You need to make boundaries explicit and encourage freedom within those boundaries. So making it really clear what people's authorities actually are, so that, and give them the license to actually move within those boundaries. So try not to parent or rescue people, help them to solve their own problems. So that, teach a man to fish kind of approach, or what people are often calling the coaching way of managing. Although coaching to me is something slightly different. But yes, try not to just step in and do it for them. Get them to work the problem through within those boundaries. Let people make mistakes or do things their way. If you're talking about people delegating work, this is often the hardest thing for people to be able to do, is to let go of how people are doing it, or make mistakes. You've got to make it so that whatever you've given them is safe for them to fail. So don't make it such a critical thing that if they fail, it's going to blow up the whole company. But create scenarios where they, if they make a mistake, they can recover from it. If you make sure that you've been clear about the outcome, give them space to explore how they're going to do it. And just make sure that they know that you're there if they need you to help them. But again, you're not going to come in and just rescue them. You're going to help them in ways that will let them nut through the problem. Set out a criteria for funding small bets or cheap to fail initiatives. What I mean by that is, I'm sure we've all been involved in business cases where it's easier in a lot of organizations to spend $5 million than $500, because the whole getting funding process is so onerous that you just wouldn't do it for small amounts of money. So you need to have something set up where you have access to funds, resources, whatever it is that you need to try things out, to experiment, even if it's just putting aside some time. So it's not necessarily money, but yeah, just being able to give people time to try things. Unless absolutely necessary, transparency should be your default. So let people know what your department's budget is and where you're at with that budget, and what resources you have, or what it is that you're trying to achieve, what the political situation is. The more information you give people, the more they're able to think through problems, and you've got everybody else's brains working on the problems. So if they don't have the information, they can't engage with problem solving. Okay, yep. So drivers for decisions reference purpose and or adding value. So what I mean by that is if you've got your accountability and authority in balance, your driving force for decision making, and not just yours but your people's, is to reference a really clear purpose and what creates the most value. So you've got to set up the clarity and information that people have access to what is your purpose in doing whatever it is that you're doing, and or what value it's creating, so that they can then come and say, oh, but I could do this a better way because I'm still achieving the purpose and the outcome with doing it a different way. Next. Okay, and this is getting back to one of your points earlier, Serene. The responsibility piece is all about getting the right people on the bus. So the only thing that you can do in responsibility is influence. One of the key things is hiring the right people and using the hiring process better than we do it most of the time today. So one of the things that we tend to do in typical hiring is we start with skills and then talent and then attitude. And we use all sorts of common biases. I'm going to hire somebody like me. And that's not just, a white male, whatever. It's people who think like me, people who are at, you quite often find people that only hire people who have a lower ability than themselves because they're threatened. It's all that kind of thinking outside the box stuff. One of the things is that we hire men for their potential, but women must have done it. We use all sorts of proofs in job ads, such as certificates or years of experience. I'm sure we've all seen ads where the thing that's only been out for 2 years, an ad says you must have 10 years experience in. All that kind of stuff. The typical hiring ad is dreadful. On the other side, what we need to do is flip the order. So hire for attitude. This is about, how much responsibility they're going to bring to the table. What are their talents? And that's, do they have aptitude in what it is that you want them to do? Skills, yes, they've got to have some basic skills, some transferable skills, but you really don't have to get so specific with skills. Review the role before you even start hiring. Is that role still right? One of the things that we tend to do is, so-and-so's left, so we'll just replace somebody in that role without actually reviewing whether or not that's the right thing to continue doing. So what's really required in that role to succeed? Build true diversity and inclusion. So you can't just have the token person and then exclude them from everything. You've got to actually make sure that you're actually using that diversity properly and seek complementary strengths. So if I'm an outgoing person, rather than hire an outgoing person, maybe I should look at somebody who's more reflective. Then we can bounce off each other in different ways. So looking for culture add and not culture fit. Cast a wide net. So get in more applications, especially in this time of talent scarcity, and then narrow the field. Rather than, I know that there's a lot of most hiring at the moment is done on buzzword bingo, and it's the number of exclusionary matches really limits who you see before you've even started. So getting hiring better, hopefully, will bring people with better responsibility. But you have to have that accountability and authority in balance, otherwise they will disengage.
I think I'm fascinated with the hiring phrase because my background is in HR, as you know, and
Yep,
so for me, it's looking at this. I mean, I have like for the last 25, 30 years, right? We've been trying to hire the right people, trying to get the right people, and trying and trying. I mean, companies have probably been doing it for hundreds of years before me, and you think about the amount of effort that we put in and to hire the right person. I mean, one interview after another, psychometric test, skill test,
yep,
knowledge test,
yep,
looking at certification, checking up your references, and so on and so forth. No, and yet, I agree with you. A lot of the time, we
yes,
are doing hiring wrong. I mean, we are
yes.
hiring people into the role that is, that we should never have touched with a 10-foot pole, right?
Yes.
And this is the reason why I mean I'm seeing a rise of a very interesting phenomenon, which is recruiters are approaching people who are currently in jobs rather
Yeah,
than giving the chance to people who have no jobs. Because the
yeah,
implication is if you are in a job, especially if you've been in a job for a couple of years and you are, stable, company is not firing you, that you are actually performing or have a certain basic level of responsibility. Right? So we've, in a way, almost resorted to doing that, right? And so I think the question really is, how do we know their attitudes, right? Because everybody who comes up for an interview would have great attitudes. And the
yeah.
reference that they give you will never be from companies that they have embezzled or, messed up and lost a lot of money for, right? So
So,
how do
yeah, yeah. So I'll give you an example. I was looking for a guy to manage my sort of. So we had an MSP, managed services provider, to run the help desk. But I wanted somebody on the inside of the organization to manage their work, hold them to account, be the person on the ground to help people out, all that sort of stuff. So an IT coordinator. And what I wanted was a people person, somebody who would take ownership and would think outside the box. So I said, this is the description of the job. This is what you're going to be doing. Um, uh, I'm not looking for an expert. What I'm looking for is somebody who can take ownership, all that sort of stuff. And I said, and must be willing to engage in philosophical conversation over coffee. And that was my key criteria. So all of the cover letters that came back, if they didn't mention coffee, they went to one side because they
okay?
weren't engaging with me as a human being. And I needed somebody who engaged with humans rather than IT. So the guy who finally got the job said, mine's a flat white or whatever it was, but I reserve the right to drink tea.
Oh, that is brilliant.
And he was perfect for the role.
Okay. I think from a HR point of view, honestly, I'm sitting here thinking, wow, all that psychometric tests that we go in to test people. I mean, you talk about attitude, talent, and skills. I think we can even test the talent. I mean, I'm a Gallup coach myself. We even can test the talent. I can know what kind of talent that you come in on. I can know, what kind of tendencies you will have in your behaviors. But that at the end of the day is exactly like what you said. It still doesn't lead to this idea of are you going to be responsible, right? Because
Yeah.
I can be a very talented and completely irresponsible or completely
Yeah.
unethical person. I mean, I've seen those people before. So all of these things, I mean, I think attitude is probably the worst, I mean, the most difficult
Yeah.
to test for. And I also think a lot of the times that is really difficult because it's an hour interview, it's 2 hours of interview, right? I mean, how are you going to be able to really kind of, suss out a person's personality in an hour, right? This is why
So
people date for a while. Nobody
yeah,
gets married after an hour's date, right?
when you meet somebody down the pub, how do you interact with them? And how is that so different from how we interact with people through job ads and interviews? And meeting somebody down the pub is where you're actually trying to get to know them, and we don't use that conversational technique in interviews. It's we have all behavioral questions just drive me insane. Tell me about a time when you again, it's infantilizing. We're not treating people as real human beings and adults. So as I
I
said,
think object to that
that
though. So I think the pub scenario is helped by the alcohol. But I'm not sure how many companies would be able, to say, okay, come, guys, we're gonna do an interview. Here's 4 pints. Have a drink, and and then we
tell
will
me
talk
about
to
your
you,
dinner.
right? Because I think that in a pub you get to know each other. I don't know whether that's the real personality of people because I've seen people who are very very different
Yeah,
after they've had a drink or two and just let
yeah,
down their hair compared to and I'm like, unless I'm going to be feeding them alcohol every day, that person is not turning up for work. This other person's sober, perhaps uptight, it's gonna turn up for work, right? This is the one I want to test and see. But
yeah,
I agree with you in the sense that a lot of the times, an interview is an artificial framework, and
yes,
it's really hard, right? I mean, it's really, really hard to know a person from an interview, which is why I realize a lot of hiring is through referrals, or
yeah,
through, poaching of people who are already in their jobs, headhunting. I mean, it's called headhunting, I think. But what I mean is really looking at, what can I do to recreate, right? What can I do to recreate the environment that they will be in? And then see what their behavior is like, right? I have seen really interesting interview techniques, getting them to come for a team building day, and these are candidates who come and then you can actually see how they interact with the team and whether they actually are interacting with the team or coming in and not doing stuff, or even things like letting the candidate know that we take our probation very seriously, and after 6 months, your colleagues, not just your boss, will have a decision on whether you fit in or you're not fitting in, right? So those are all things that
yeah,
I guess people can think about. But
yeah.
to your point
But
is before that.
just asking different types of questions. So and creating I'll give you another example of something that I did in an interview. I worked for an organization that did software for newspaper companies, and the environment in newspapers was very blokey. So one of the things I would do in interview was swear, because if they couldn't deal with people swearing, they wouldn't be able to deal with our customers. So it's
So
just about trying to
I was
get
about
to
to, no, I was going to say, I was about to put the comment in that for those of you who are not Australian, blocky means male dominated,
yes,
very kind of male culture. I was just going to put it into the comment. I was just like typing and then you stop talking. So I was like, okay, I'll say it instead, right? Okay, so a block is a guy, a man, right? So yeah, I think I agree with you, but I think I agree more with your comment on that people should come in and culture add rather than culture fit.
Yes.
I once had, so as you can tell, I'm extroverted. I am, talkative. I To be frank, I am more of a thinker than I am, of this high EQ person. And also, I'm a very much of a big picture guy. So I once had an assistant who is the complete opposite of me. Right? He hardly ever says anything. He is totally clued in to the entire kind of emotional state and relationships of the entire office. He knows exactly who is unhappy with who and what has happened. Um, I mean, it's so funny, right? Because you think about it, right? People say, "Oh, women are so gossipy," right? But he's totally clued in, but he doesn't actually gossip because he's a
Yeah.
very high introvert. He listens and he learns and he keeps quiet about it. And on top of it, he's very detailed oriented. So he's like my spy almost. It's like, okay, so people are not working very well anymore. What happened? And he's like, oh, a week ago this happened and so is not happy with this and that kind of thing and so. And then I'll be like, okay, so what do I do, right? Because as I've told you, I'm not very high in EQ. I'm like, so what do I do? And he'll be like, okay, you should talk to this other person who's an influencer in the office, and maybe if she could talk to them, they would be like, happy and so on. So I had this like, he is the exact opposite of me.
Yeah.
Everyone feels sorry for him because in all our conversations, he hardly talks, right? They all think that, because I'm his boss as well, right? That I'm just kind of like dominating him and I'm talking over him all the time and he never gets to say anything and so on. But the truth is, I think I relied on him a lot. He enjoyed his work,
Yeah.
and he enjoyed. I mean, he basically is the kind of who he just doesn't enjoy talking. So when we go out for lunch, it will be an hour of me chit chatting about this, that, and everything, and he will only talk if you ask him a direct question, like, "Okay, what happened?" Yes, but it was a brilliant sort of pair, and I think a lot of the times, I as leaders, when we think about culture, we are really thinking about, oh, what values in my company, what are the, what integrity, innovation, and so forth, trust. But I think last week I had this discussion with another guest, Hilton, and he said this, which I agree. Your culture is the behavior that your people
Yes.
exhibit every single day of your working life,
Yeah.
including the worst day your organization has ever faced. Right? Like the day before lockdown, where you have been notified that tomorrow, the whole country is going to lock down and you have 2 days to get there.
Yeah.
That kind of situation. How do your people behave? Right? So
Yes.
I agree with that definition. And I think when you look at it that way, then think about what are the behaviors we can take on to make our organization behave better,
Yes.
add more value, move towards our purpose. Like take actions. Like behavior is action. Takes action towards our purpose in a more concrete, faster, better way. Right. So I
Yeah.
think that really is the culture we're talking about. And when we say culture add, like look at this person and go, can you make my organization behave better? And if we look at it that way, I think we are not so. It's not like, oh, can you fit in with my team culture? Because as I'm sure you are aware of, there are so many teams where we bring on these people and they really fit in with our team, and everybody in my team is really happy, and no work gets done.
Yeah. And it's good. You get groupthink because everybody's the same.
Yes, yes. So I think a lot of that thinking as leaders. So just kind of really think about it. When we are coming to the top of the hour, I wanted to just summarize our discussion, and I think I would love for you to add to it. If you guys have any questions, like just throw it in. Let us know if you have anything or if your experience doesn't jive with this. But I would say probably the first thing as a leader, and I talk to all leaders about this, especially if you're leading a large organization. Don't think it's the people. I know many leaders don't agree with this, but I've been in HR for most of my life, and I will say this, which is I feel that people turn up to work to do a good job.
Yes.
Very, very few people turn up to work thinking, let's see how I can screw this company over
Yeah.
or strive to get as little work done as possible. Very, very, there are, but very few
Yes.
people turn up like that. most people turn up hoping and wanting to do a good job. When they join a company, they would really like to do a good job, to put in a good day's work, and to get meaning from their work.
Yeah.
Most that's more like, I would say that's 90% of people. Then think about it as, if many people in my organization is not behaving that way, then it's probably not the person. I mean, if everybody behaves that way and one person doesn't, yeah, it's the person, no problem. Yes, but if it's like, oh, I'm the leader and I'm the only one taking ownership and I'm the only one engaged and everybody on my team is skiving off, it's not the people. It's not
Yeah.
the people. It is the environment, it is the system, and really depending on what kind of leader you are, how far you are up in the ladder, think about what you can do to change the system. I always tell people this, which is Gallup study on employee engagement says the immediate superior is accountable for 60 to 70% of the factors. The immediate superior. So even if the whole company is toxic and the system is terrible, if the immediate superior can act in a way that shields the people and keeps this team going, you have 60-70% chance of doing it, right? So don't give up, right? But really think about, what can I do in my own personal capacity to shift the system, give more authority, reduce the accountability, or the other way around, right? Reduce the authority if that you have people, if that's the case with your people, and really think about it that way. And then after that, then it becomes, okay, so I have got a system running. After that, it becomes, who are the one or two people I need to get rid of, perhaps bring on somebody else who is better for this team. And every time that you are expanding, I think in IT, for example, I mean, they're recruiting people en masse, right? So think about, as I bring these people in, how can they build my team, how can they improve the behavior of my team? And I think that will go a really, really long way, I mean, towards just building accountability, ownership in general. Okay. Do you have any last words that you want to share with us?
I've given Serena a copy of the PowerPoint slides. Everybody is free to have a copy of those. Do with them what you will, pick them apart. They have got a lot of animation in, so if you want to flatten them, you might want to create them into more slides. But if you could attribute authorship, that would be wonderful, and give credit where credit's due. But yes, they're totally free for people to use as they would like to.
So thank you very much. I mean, that's really generous of you. If you want to leave them with, okay, so before we leave, Melanie, I mean, if you want to add her LinkedIn, you want to connect with her, find out a little bit more about what Organizational Ecologist does. I think we had that one question that we want to do. Do you want to get to
Oh,
it
that's
right
right. Yeah.
now?
Yeah.
Yes.
So organizational ecologist is kind of like a made-up term. It's but the way that I see it, it's more holistic than a lot of the other job titles. So it's not only looking at the company itself, but also the environment in which the company operates. All of those things go into, well, how are our systems working for us or against us?
And for those of you who are really looking into this, I think last week I talked to Hilton really about, I don't know whether they are behavioral economics, but we talked about how culture really is the behavior of your people and how do you shift the behavior of your people. I think his definition is even more, it's even more extreme than mine. He says culture is the behavior of the edges of your organizations on the worst day of your organization has ever faced. And I thought that was like, wow, because like that's really a high bar to go. And I also spoke on a previous, like a couple of weeks ago, about systemic resilience. Really, how can you create a system in the organization that then does this contingency management for you, so that if I am as a leader drop a ball, something in the system will pick it up, right? So that's those are all things that we have spoken about. But like you said, the ecology is really the bigger picture. Like, how does all of that fit together? Behavior fit together, systems resilience fit together. How does all of that fit together?
Yep.
So, if you have any final questions, please like throw it into the comment. I will share it with Melanie. If not, Melanie, what is one thing that you would like to leave our viewers with?
Wherever possible, look at how you can actually increase ownership for your people. I think everybody will be much happier, more shit will get done, and everybody can have a nicer time. It makes work less crap.
I think last week we had Colin Newland come. So those of you who have not familiar with his work, he is all about decrepify work. I had him as a
Yep.
guest in the previous season. His work is all about decrepify work, and I agree with him. I think Hilton last week also was spoke very highly of him. But really, it's about how can and all this time I will share this as a parent, right? When I first started working at home with COVID, I realized something, right? The way that we think about what, like, oh, okay, it's work, or oh, I've got to work, I've got to get to work, and that whole, oh, it's work, is terrible for our children to
Yes.
witness,
Yes.
because they are going to grow up and they have spent 20 years studying really hard to grow up and spend 40 years in the, okay, I've got to get to work. Okay, let me get to work. Life, really? Is that what we
Yeah.
want for them?
Yeah.
And when you look at kids and the way that they engage in their own kind of role play of work, um, people, I mean, that's something that they enjoy. And my son gave me this wake up call because one day, when he was much, much younger, he opened my laptop and he started pounding on the keyboard and going like, and then pounding on the keyboard and then pounding on the, and I was like, what are you doing? I'm doing what, mommy? Don't disturb me. I'm doing what, mommy?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, let me tell you this. And I actually started telling him that, no, I enjoy my work, which actually I do. Obviously, I don't enjoy the paperwork, which is usually why I'm sighing in front of the computer. But I love the engagement with people. I love the impact that I'm making on organizations and on business leader. I love the coaching. I love the talking. I love my work, right? Not the paperwork that I'm signing over, but the rest of it. And I started to build that, right? And so think of it that way as a business leader. What can you do to build that work for your people so that when they go home or when they work at home with their kids, right? It's not, we're working, but hey, I'm working and I'm engaged and I'm doing something that is meaningful to me. And I think both for the people and also for our next generation and for your company, certainly, the returns will be phenomenal.
Yeah.
So thank you so much today, Melanie. Is there any last comment? I always let my guests have the last word.
Um,
Yes. And so if not, then I really thank you, Melanie, for being with us today. Thank you for all of you for listening in. I really appreciate your time. Next week, I'm going to be speaking to Dennis Bernard, and we are going to talk about the complicity to mediocrity, right? How the world is conspiring to make us mediocre, which is a topic that I love. Yes. Okay. So thank you so much, Melanie, and we'll see you
thank
all
you.
next Thursday. See ya. Bye bye.